In this video, we're going to be looking at using MetaBox with Oxygen, and to do that, if we head over to plugins, you'll see that we've installed the MetaBox default, the MetaBox AIO, Oxygen, and then also code snippets. So this is the premium version of MetaBox, just a lot easier to use than the free version. And what we're going to do is just the default install. These are the standard menu items, and we're just going to work with those to create this custom post type with some custom fields. Once we have the custom field set up and the custom post, we're then going to head over to Oxygen and set up the templates to show those custom field values. So the first thing I'm going to do then is head over to the post types, and we're going to create a custom post type, and we'll call this custom news. So we'll create a post type called custom news, and the singular name will just be news, custom news, and of course the slug then will just be new. So then I'm going to publish. Then we'll head over to labels. Labels I'm going to keep the same. What you also may have noticed is that after creating that setting here and saving, you will have seen that custom news has appeared here on the left hand side, and that just means that that custom post type has now been created. So labels then just refers to labels. So if we hover over custom news, you'll see you have all custom news or add new. So if I wanted to change that, I could say add new news, for example. Update that, and now when I head over, you'll see now it says add new news, but we don't really need to do any of that. So I'm just going to go back to the default value for the labels. Under advanced though, there are a couple of things that we can look at doing. One of those that we're going to do, we're going to leave all the settings at default, but what I do want to do is change the icon. I think we can come up with something nicer for news. And for news, we'll just look at something that has a bit of text, maybe the impression of a news article. And if we quickly have a look, there's not a massive selection of icons to choose from. But if we have a look through the icons here, perhaps we can just find something that looks more like news, like that, for example. Maybe that could just be like a newspaper. And then what I'm going to do is just update the settings, and that's it. Then we're going to go over to supports, and you'll see here that these are the default items within WordPress. So if I go over to custom news and I go to a post, I'm going to show you what I mean by those particular items. So here we have the title, the content, and then on the right hand side you can see we have the permalink, the featured image. And that's because here we have the title selected, the editor, which is the content, and then the thumbnail, which is the featured image for the post. So if I was to add excerpt and author and custom fields, and I was to update that, and now if I refresh the page, so we'll just reload that, and now you'll see that we have the author box here, and we also now have the excerpt, which it can also now be completed. So that was just the addition then of the we also added custom fields. So for custom fields, what you have to do in WordPress is head over here to preferences and go over to panels, and you'll see activate custom fields. We enable and reload, but there of course aren't any custom fields yet, and you don't actually need to have this enabled for MetaBox, but it's just more to show how that works. So there we have the supports, and then we have taxonomies. Now we're not going to use any of these taxonomies. We're going to create our own taxonomy. So we're going to go and create our own news taxonomy, which is just like a category or a tag. So we'll add a new one, and we're going to go with news categories. Singular name will be news category, and news category will be the slug, and we'll publish that. Maybe just add a capital there. That's better. And now what we're going to do is look at labels, but we're not going to worry too much about labels just yet. What you'll also notice is we've created the custom taxonomy, but it hasn't appeared here yet. And that's because we haven't selected the post type. Under advanced, we're not going to change anything under advanced. We'll leave everything as the default. And then under post types, we deselect post and we're going to select news. And we're going to update that. So now with that updated, if I head over custom news, you'll see news categories. To make this work in Oxygen, we want to set up a template, but maybe just to add at least one post. That way we'll see when the custom field values pull through. So this title will be the first news article. And what I'm going to do is set a featured image. I'll just take that image of dinner on the beach. And here I'm going to add some text. And to do that, we'll just get some lorem ipsum text. So you can just do a search for lorem ipsum. Go to the lorem ipsum generator and copy whatever you want from the page. Just one paragraph should do it. And there we have some text. I'm going to hit publish. What I am also going to do though is add a category. And over here we have the slug, and here we have the news categories, and here I'm going to say news category 1. So there we have our first news category. Update that, and now I'm going to view the news, and you'll see we can't see anything because we haven't allocated this content to a template within Oxygen. So hit the back button, and now what we're going to do is head over to Oxygen and create the templates. So under templates here, we'll add a new template, and we're going to call this single news. And we'll inherit the main areas. That's the header and the footer. Singular, I'm going to put down to news. So custom news, there we go. And I'm going to set the template priority to 1. Then I'm going to publish that. And I'm setting the priority to make sure that the template pulls through when looking at the single news item, and it doesn't default to just a single post. So the Oxygen loading. Oxygen loaded, you'll see that we are previewing the first news article, but you'll also see here that we have this 404 error. And that's because the permalinks haven't been set. So the way that WordPress is set up, it's unable to find that first news article. So to get that to work, I'm going to head over here to settings, to permalinks, and now just set the structure. And the structure that I'm going to set is going to be category and then post name. Then I'm going to save the changes. Then I'm going to head back here to Oxygen. And now if I was to reload Oxygen, and I hear you all shouting, no, it takes too long. Well, Oxygen's going to load pretty quickly, and you'll be able to see that the 404 error is no longer. There we go, Oxygen loaded, and there's no 404 error. Right, then we're just going to create a structure in the structure panel, and now we're going to add a section, and now we're going to add some items to our post. So to get started, I'm going to head over to WordPress. I'm going to go to dynamic data, and I'm just going to choose the title. And then I'm going to choose the content and featured image. And there we have those news article items coming through. So that's the one way to add elements, is to go to the WordPress dynamic data, or of course we can go to basics and we can add items ourselves. So for example, I'm going to add some text, and this I want to be the post taxonomy. So I'm just going to click on that and then head over to insert data, and we're going to look at categories, tags, taxonomies for the post, and we're going to call it news category because that's what it is. It's the news category, and we're going to put in a separator. We'll insert that, and that will now pull through the category for this particular news article. The next thing that we're going to do is just move things around a bit. So maybe what I want to do is move the image up. Let's maybe center the items, the news article. I think I want to change the color. So let's change that text color. Now, quite easy just to select the color. And I'm also going to change the typography a bit. So we're going to change the font weight to 500, and I'm going to change the line height to 1.2. What I'm also going to do is just add a bit of margin, or maybe not as much margin. And then under the next item, I'm going to add a bit more margin to the image. There we have the image, and the next thing that we actually want to add is the excerpt before the main content. So under the image, we will add the excerpt for that post, and to do that, I'm just going to add some text. We'll select the text, insert data, and just select excerpt here from post. And then under that image, we want to add some space, so we select the image, and we're going to give that a margin of 20. Now you'll see that the excerpt at the moment is actually taking some information from the content, and that would be a default behavior that you would see if a specific excerpt wasn't set. So I'm going to head over to my post, so custom news, I'm going to edit, and I'm going to add some excerpt text, and that is text over here on the right hand side, and this is the text. Okay, and now you'll start to see some custom fields pulling through as we get the template going in Oxygen, and that of course is going to be very distracting now because we don't really need those custom fields. So I'm going to go to panels and just disable and reload, and that'll just get rid of that block. Right, so now we have our post and it's showing up very nicely. If I was to have a look at that on the front end, it's working. The excerpt, the news, everything's fine. Right, now what we need to do is add some custom fields and then go ahead and add them to our template. So I'm going to head over to Metabox and I'm going to go to custom fields, and I'm going to trash that field group, and then we're going to build a new field group. So we're going to add new, and we're going to call that news fields, and I will actually add some fields. So you've got two options here. You have one to add the fields and one for settings. So we'll add field, and then you'll see this list come up, and it's quite a robust list of items that you can add, but I find that it's in two columns and it's not easy to follow. It's left to right and alphabetical. So what I normally do, just select the first item, and then here under type, we're going to just scroll down until we see one that we want. And the first field we're going to do is just go with a text field. So the label here will be custom text. The ID can be anything really. So if you want to, you can just change that to text. Alternatively, you can go in and create something of your very own. If you try and save without that, what's going to happen is you'll just be asked to fill out the field. So this is just really the ID for the field, and maybe you want something, so let's go custom news. Maybe you want to do something that's more human readable. Then we're going to put a label description, and that's just so we can see where that appears in the website. Then we'll do an input description. So the label is the title and the input is where you're going to add the data, and the default value, we'll just call this default item, and the placeholder insert or add news here, should we say. Right, and I'm not going to worry about sizes for the input box, required, not required, read only, not going to look at that, not going to look at anything else. And once that's done, we're going to publish that. So now we have that field completed, and we're going to add another field, and that field will just be a bullet list. So in this case, if you want to, or a radio button should I say, so we select a radio button, and the label will be make a choice, and then our ID could be make a choice. The label description, so we'll go with let's call this one choice description, and then here input, we'll go choice input, description. And now we have the choices, and so what we can do is we can go 1, which is the field value, and this is the human readable word, and then 2, which will be the value that's returned, then the human readable word, and then 3, and then the human readable word. Right. There's no default value. Inline would be to display the options next to each other. We'll just go with the classic in a column look, require clonable columns. We're not going to worry about any of that, and then we'll update. Now what you'll notice here is that if I go to edit my news, there are no custom fields yet, and that's because we haven't told MetaBox where to display these custom fields. So then we head over to settings, and here under post type is where we can choose a single or multiple post type. So the post type we're going to look for is news. We're going to add it to news. We're not going to have any other rules, the position, all of that stuff. We're just going to leave as standard. Then we're going to update. So now when we refresh the page, you'll actually see that we have some custom fields that have appeared by magic. And now you'll see that there's the label text and the label description, make a choice, choice description, and then the input description, default item, the description for that input, and here the description here, choice input, should maybe be choose input description. So right, let's go with, instead of saying default item, let's say, instead, that was the default item that was already entered. We delete that, and now we see the placeholder, which is add news here. This is the news stuff, and we're going to choose number 2, lucky number 2, update. And when we look at our item, of course, we won't see any of that on the page because we haven't added our custom fields. So now we head back to Oxygen, and we get templates, and now we go to single news, edit with Oxygen. And now what we're going to do is add those custom fields to our template. So I'm just loading Oxygen in real time, and you'll see that in a fresh install here, it's not taking that long to open up. Right, and then what I'm also going to do is maybe look at changing some of the spacing and sizing. Before we do that, I think what I'm going to do is add a div, and I'm going to put the items that I want inside that div, and I'm going to make that 60% wide. And then I'm going to add columns. So I'm going to have 2 columns. The left hand column will be slightly narrower than the right hand side, and now we're going to add our custom fields. So I want the values on the right, and I'd like to put in my own title for that field on the left. So in the right hand side, I'm going to add a text block, and I'm going to go to insert data, and now you'll see insert dynamic data. We have MetaBox field. I'm going to choose that, and I'm going to go with custom text, and I'm going to use the default input. I'm not going to make any changes. If I had something to prepend with that was set within MetaBox, that could be output here, but we're not going to do that. We're just going with the straight default settings, and you'll notice that it's a little bit above center, and that's because it's aligned to the top. And what I'm going to do is just have that text aligned in the middle, so it just looks a bit better. And this column here also aligned in the middle. Here I'm going to add some text, and that'll be the stuff title. And I also want to align it maybe to the right. That'll just look a little bit better in the table view. And now I'm going to duplicate that. So let's duplicate that, and this will be the choice title, and then here we're going to insert the data MetaBox, but we're going with make a choice, and once again this will be inserted with the default values as it is. So there we have the choice. Then what we're going to do is just neaten this up. We'll make this look a bit nicer. So with the columns, maybe we want to just add a border at the bottom of the first one, then make that 1. Let's go to bottom, let's go to color, make a dark color, and let's make it solid. So we'll just add that, or that should appear under Let's try that again. Borders, say bottom, solid. The width should be 1. Right, so we should have, there we go. And what I'm also going to do for that div, I'm going to go size and spacing. Let's just give it a bit of spacing all around. And then I'm going to give it a background color. And I'm just going to go with a very light background. You'll see now that everything looks too much the same. So what I'll do now is change that background color to be a little bit darker. I'll just copy that. If you want to, you can use a class if you're going to be doing a lot of these, and then it's just easier to change in one place and everything changes. And then here I'm just going to go with white. Right, so now we have our table at the bottom, and that's just to differentiate it from the content. And then this content, I don't want to make the same width as the image, so there's a couple of ways I can do that, but pretty much size and spacing. And I'm just going to make that with a percentage and make it let's see, 80%. So, and also you'll notice that it's aligned in the center. We're going to change that to align to the left. And just to make sure, we want to make some space underneath in case there's an issue with the text. So, right, there we have our excerpt, the lorem ipsum, and then the custom fields. To see how that looks on mobile, let's have a look. So yeah, that looks okay. Maybe that's a little bit big for mobile, so let's make that about 40. Yeah, that looks fine. And then this table is looking really silly, so what I'm going to do is select the table, and now the width, let's see, we'll make that 100% rather. Right, and of course now we want all the items centered, so here we will center, here we will center, and of course if this was a class you would just change it in the one and all the others would follow. Right, so there we have, yeah, I think that's looking fine on mobile. And if I really wanted to, we could just, you know, you could add a slight shadow to that element so that it stands out a bit more, and then we could just do something like that. So perhaps like that, and then on all devices, of course, there's no spacing because the settings were made in the mobile view. And then here we could just go to effects and box shadow and drop that down, something like that. And why, that's why. Right, let's make that a 0, 0, and then give it a blur of 5, and do the same on the next item. So a lot easier, of course, if you have a class assigned, because then instead of doing everything twice, you could just do everything once. Right, so there we have our various items. It looks nice on mobile, and it's looking good in all devices. Save that. Let's have a look at that now. So when I refresh, you'll see first news article, and then the content and the custom fields. And the one thing we haven't done is the taxonomy. The taxonomy is there, and is that because we haven't added a taxonomy? Let's have a look. Let's edit the news. We didn't add a category, so news category 1, and enter, update. And now when we view the news, you'll see that we have the news category 1. So everything's working, looking good. Click on it, and now we're seeing the archive for posts instead of the archive for this particular category. So I'm going to head back to admin, oxygen templates, and now we're going to do the archive for the news. So we'll add a new template, archive news. We'll go with the main again, and now we head over to the archive link, and we're going to do taxonomies and post type. So post type is going to be news, and then taxonomies is going to be, and if you want to check, hover over and you'll see news categories. So once again, news, and we're going to say all news categories. So that all share the same taxonomy, and we're also going to give that a template priority of 1. And we'll publish, and now we're going to head over to that particular archive. So here I am on the archive, and if I refresh, you'll see just some lorem ipsum, which is content from the first post, is pulling through, and that's because we haven't set up what we're going to do here. We have 2 options. The one is to go with easy posts. So let's add under helpers, we're going to go to the easy posts, and you'll see when you load easy posts, it loads with this default grid glossy, which is, in my experience, completely unusable by most people. So we're just going to look for a more usable item. So we could go with the grid image standard, which is something you'd recognize, or we might want to go with the list, with the list standard with the image on the left. Image on the left, something like that. So I think we'll go with that, just a little bit more interesting. So there we have the news article. I can save that, and now when I go to my page and I refresh, there it is. The other option we have in setting that up is to use the repeater. So what I'm going to do is add a section, and sometimes you might want to use the repeater because you have more control over the layout. So on the left hand side here, the first thing I'm going to add is the featured image. And I'm going to go into that featured image, go to data, featured image, go to large, and there we have our featured image. Now you'll see the difference in images here is that that's a background image, and this is the image as it is. So here we can have the alt text have an effect in the search engine. Here being a background image, not so much. Then on the right hand side, we're going to add some of the post elements. So once again, we can either add from here, or I can go to WordPress, dynamic data, and add over there. So we can add a title, and I'm going to show you the difference now. And then I'm going to add the categories, and then I'm going to add nothing else that I want to add from there. Maybe the date, but the date, no, not in that format. So that's about it that I'm going to add there. Now there's no link here on this item, so the first thing I need to do is add the link. So we add the link, head over to data, and then select permalink. I am going to change the typography here because that's, far too big and bold. So I'm going to change that down to 40 in font size. Now let's try that again. Typography, we're going to change that down to 40. Going to give that a font weight of 500. And that's just going to make it a bit easier to read, or we can follow the example above and go a little bit smaller. The next thing we're going to do then is some text, and what we want to do here actually is the category. So insert data, categories, tags, taxonomies, go to the news category and add a separator. So there is where the taxonomies will appear, and now you'll actually see it pulling through. Now what we want to do perhaps is add a custom field. So after that, I'm going to add a text element. Under basics, text block, select the text block, go to insert data, and here I'm going to choose a meta box field, and I'm going to choose the make choice, and I'm going to insert, and now you'll see that that choice has come through. And then I want to add a button which just says, read more. So we'll add the button, and we'll just go read more. And what I'm going to do now is just have a look at the color, and when we hover over, I'm just going to change that so that that looks a little bit better. Right, so there we have the setting complete, and now I'm going to save that. And before I go any further, I'd like these to also be aligned in the center. So I head over here to my div settings and change it to middle. We'll save that, head over to the website, and now you'll see there's our article. Something else that I can do is select the div where the image is and go to advanced, and then under size and spacing actually put in the padding of 0, and you'll actually see then that the image enlarges and actually fills that whole div. So we've done that, and I'm going to head over to that title, head over to typography and set the line height there to 1.2. What I'll do is just add some spacing under the taxonomy there. And what I'm also going to do then is under that particular item, add a bit of spacing. And then maybe I want to prepend that text with something. And if I want to do that, I'm just going to wrap it with a div. That way I can add some text. So let's add some text and say the title for the selection. And now you'll see that it's not really working in the right way. So I'm going to move this text first, and then all I do is I go into my div, I set the width there to 100%, and then I'm going to change that to a horizontal layout, and you'll see then that that kind of works quite well. And if I go to that text item, I'm going to take the margin of that item and actually now apply it here. So there we have it applied. We'll save, and now when we look at it, you'll see that we have this is our layout, and we click on it and we don't go through to the post, and that's because for the button we need to set the URL to the permalink, save, and now when we select the button we're redirected through to the post. And if I select news category 1, I'm back on the right archive page. Something else that I want to do is add the date, and I want to do it similar to that. So what I do is I head over to my div, I'm inside the div, I'm going to add a div to put that in. So I add a div, and the first thing I'm going to do now is just add some text, and I'm going to click on the text. I'm going to head over to insert data, and I'm going to put in the date. So I'll select the date, and here it asks me for the format. So the date format, I'm going to do day dash month dash and then a capital Y so that I get the correct date in. These are just standard formats for the date. The next thing I'm going to do is create a background for that. So the background color, I'll go with that as it's part of the theme. Then I'm going to do the text color of white, or maybe that color is fine. Then we need to do some size and spacing, so I'll do some padding. What I'm also going to do now is give that a border radius, so border a radius of 5, and because I want it to be in the top right hand corner and on top of the image, and I'm in the div where the image is, so to show you that, there's the image and there's my div, and I'm inside that div. So I'm going to do the layout of absolute, so it appears in that block. On the right we'll go 20, and at the top we'll go 20. Now you'll see that we're actually not inside the div for the image. It's now exceeded that border, and the reason is because the div in which we have the div for the date, the div housing that has not got a layout setting to relative. We go to advanced, to layout, look here for the position, and we set that position to relative, and there you see it bounce back into that position. Now we save, and now when I go and have a look on the page, you'll see that we have our date, and the image isn't selectable as a link, so I'm just going to select the image, create a link, say add link, change that to data, to permalink, save, and there we go. Now when I select the image, I will click through to the article, and from here I can go to the news category. So I think I'll do away with my easy post now. The last thing I need to add on this page is going to be the archive title. So we'll add, and I'm going to add a title, so a heading, and I'm going to move that heading to the inside of the section, make some changes. Let's change the color. Of course, the font size, I'm going to drop that down, the font weight to 500. H1 is a fine tag, and the next thing I'm going to do to put that in the middle is I could just change the alignment of the section into the center. Advanced size and spacing. Oops, I need that for the title, and we'll just change that to 20, and then I'm going to change the line height for the archive title as well, typography, and the line height to 1.2. So there we have it, and if I look at that in mobile view, then that'll be the title, the post. So yeah, everything is kind of coming together, and let's just do that. And now what I'm going to do is insert data, and I look for the archive title, and there we have the archive title, and you'll see it has this prefix, and I'll show you how to remove that now. The other thing that I want to do is for the individual items in the columns, I'm going to highlight them a bit. So if I have more, we'll just make that a separation of 20 to the next item, and then under the effects I'm going to do a box shadow. We'll just bring this down to around 20, and then I'm going to have no horizontal. We'll just have a slight vertical offset, and it'll look something like that. Maybe that's not enough, so let's just go back to the effects, box shadow, and let's make that 3. We just want slightly more at the bottom, and what we could look at doing then, so now we're just messing around, wasting time. Let's just maybe up the shadow value a little bit. Okay, so very subtle top shadow there, but it'll kind of make sense when you have a few on the page. And we'll save that, head over, and there we have that done. So you'll see now it says news category 1 because we're in that news category. And if I head to the back end here and I go to custom news and I say view custom news, you'll see that it says archives custom news. So everything's using the right archive page, but we don't need that. So what I've done on my website under beyoung.co.za, I've actually created a blog, and inside that blog I just created an article with the code, but the code is available freely on the internet. And I'm just going to go to blog, and then I'm just going to go to remove prefix from archive title, and I'm going to copy the code, which is just a standard filter. And then what I'll do is head over to snippets. I'm going to add a new snippet. We'll call it remove the prefix. We'll paste that in, save changes and activate. We can close that and refresh, and now it'll be gone from all the archive pages and also from the category page. So that's just a very quick example then of how you can integrate your custom fields into your individual article, and then also how you can include a custom field in the archive view, and that is all done using MetaBox. So I hope you enjoyed that video, and thank you for watching.